everyone. If you're going to be joining us, we'll start right here at 3 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, and we'll get into a fun, healthy, related to the yoga life philosophy. So these sessions are held every Friday at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. They after the fact, and it's a nice way to transition in our practice from being on the mat to how it affects and benefits our lives off the mat, and then vice versa. So things that are happening in our lives can come onto our mat, and we can continue to process in the relationship with ourselves and with each other. So that's what we're here, that's what we're doing. Hopefully you'll join us and participate with some questions or comments or things that maybe came up in your practice this week. So really just here to hold the space and share a little bit more about the yoga life journey. A nice way when you're perhaps not necessarily clear on what you might ask or comment that you may have is to bring yourself into a comfortable upright seated position, and then just go ahead and soften the eyes closed, and you can sit, for a minute. Doesn't seem like a long time, but if you close your eyes and become still, there's so much space, and a lot of times it'll change the frequency of your mind. So if you are transitioning from something else, it can bring you into this state and where we can participate. So head above your heart, and close your eyes and begin to observe the breath as it comes into your body and out. And take a few deep breaths, feel your body land. And what we're doing is opening ourselves into the context of the conversation. We don't know where it's going to go, just like anything else. But when you sit in the moment, and you'll realize that there's a lot more support than you may have thought. And so that's about 1 minute. Sit up nice and tall, take a deep breath in, and then fully exhale, and you can bring your eyes back into the space. And so we've been doing this and incorporating these mindfulness meditations before every asana practice, whether it's the flow practice that we're hosting in the morning or in the evening when we do the detox practice, as a way to train our bodies and our minds to realize that we have this tool. And even if it's 30 seconds, it's not about how long you sit necessarily. It's understanding that there's this switch and that we can toggle in this tool set and where we can receive in our minds. When you talk about when you come out of a meditation, a seated meditation, even though your eyes open and you start to engage with all the things that are around you based on the environment that you're in, there's this sustainable effect of the space, or if you want to call it the calm. There's so many different words to describe what we're talking about with this inner feeling, right? This sanctuary, this oasis that is developing and expanding with you every time you come to your mat. Or if I say this, if running or swimming or any other activity is your meditation, you know what I'm talking about. You get out of the pool after you just swam, laps, and you're meditating when you're swimming. You're breathing, and then you come out and you can feel the certainty of that space and how it served you. Many times people just say, "Oh, I feel good," or "That was amazing." But realizing that it's something that sustains itself and it carries with you, hopefully until the next time you get back in the pool or the next time you get on the mat. But sometimes there's things that are happening outside in our lives that short circuit us, cut off our fuse, not even shorten the fuse, they just cut off the fuse. And you feel like, oh my gosh, where did my where the benefits of my practice go? Well, they're still there, but it's continuously retraining the brain and the body, right, to notice that it's there, that it hasn't gone away. And so whoever's on right now, I may know you, I may not know you personally, but it would be wonderful if you took a moment, and just as I did at the top of this conversation, and you close your eyes, and you're not trying to think, you're not trying to develop a question or a comment, just see where you are in relationship to your practice today. It could be physically, mentally, emotionally, or spiritually. And inside of that, there could be one question that appears. There could be, many questions that appear. But through your sitting and through your stillness, and close your eyes, and something should appear with a question mark at the end. And then once you have been tagged with that, once it has come to you, you didn't make it up, you didn't try to create it. Once it comes to you, you go ahead and, you got to break through that layer of vulnerability, which I fully understand, because growing up and all the way to the point until I started really practicing yoga regularly, I would classify myself as very shy, be the one that just, would rather sit back and let somebody else ask the question, right? And realizing that, what I was proposing, or I had a question in mind that, it wasn't as good as what I think hold me back from breaking through that moment of vulnerability and to just reach out, share something. But when I started practicing yoga more regularly, it started to break all that down. Right? Where does that shyness come? Does it come from, different external influences and behavior patterns of how you were treated or how things were developing around you? I don't know. I'm sure there's many factors that contributed to that. In part, there's many factors as to, who we are and just how we're made. But that doesn't mean that, we can't see a path in where we're evolving, or at least, stepping into things in a different way, or with a little bit more comfort and confidence. So, who knows? It's all up for interpretation. That's the beauty of the yoga life philosophy, is that if the bell rings in your mind and goes ding, and you have that moment of realization, that's all that matters. And so I'll give you some space here. Just take a moment. Curiosity. Anything on your mat, off your mat. And sometimes I say, think of the pose that is your favorite pose right now. And there's characteristics about that pose and reasons why you like it. That's a good place to start. And then you can do the opposite and think about the pose that, isn't vibing with you right now. And presents certain challenges, reasons why you may not like it. And so just seeing how your mind is working with that in a more of a singular fashion and connected to the physical practice in a pose. And so a little bit more background related to the yoga life. Could be any dimension of time really that you practice yoga, and maybe you go to a yoga studio, maybe you do YouTube classes online even before this pandemic, and we're all doing YouTube classes online. But it could be any dimension of time at which you're finding yourself on your mat. And some people consider yoga to be purely a physical, more like an exercise or a workout. And that's totally fine. And then other people find elements of yoga and that are useful to support them in different parts of their lives. And so different relationships or things that travel through the mind or situations that appear, jobs, career changes, really a lot around change and things changing, because yoga is teaching us that change is inevitable and that it's actually constant. So we many times think that change is this variable that is going to appear, here and there, when in actuality, the belief is that, change is always taking place. It's just, what are you basing that definition on? And that's, something that we have the luxury of exploring as human beings. And take any word in the dictionary, and then how are you defining it? What are you basing the definition of that word on? And mostly it's related to your own personal experience, or what you were taught, or what you think, or what you read at a certain point, somebody that maybe shared something with you that made sense. So, if the yoga practice is more of a physical exercise workout, that's totally fine, continue. If your practice is opened up, to other parts and layers and things coming in, things coming out, beyond the exercise component, and you find the value, then I think the yoga life philosophy and what we're talking about, and the ways at which we can see the reciprocity of the yoga asana, the physical practice, with a practice that is with you when you go to the gas station or you go out to the restaurant. Right now we're being asked to practice this thing called social distancing, and it takes awareness. Well, where does awareness come from? The birthplace of awareness in many cases is, when you're on a yoga mat, and when you're learning this relationship about your breath and your body, and how those two things can work together and support each other, and then give space for one another, and so that you can co-create and develop what's called the poses, and then co-create and develop what is ultimately turning out to be a sequence of postures, becomes an experience. So that co-creation, that reciprocity, think of it as really a mirror and an example of all relationships and things that go on when we're out in our lives and moving through life day in and day out. So let's see, Leslie, good afternoon, thank you for joining. Bradley, what's up? Amazing. Noah, hope you're well. So a couple of you guys on here, would love any questions, any comments. Again, you can stay just for your question, hear the response, hear the conversation, tap in, tap out, go put it on the background if you got something else going on, listen back on it later. Anything applies. You don't have to stay for the whole hour if you don't want to. Leslie asks, I do not do back bends ever. The pose feels antithetical to what my body wants to do. Should I follow that instinct or work against it and toward going beyond bridge? So Leslie's talking about a path in sequencing where, when you get through practice and you've opened up your hips, you've engaged and woken up your legs, this is normally maybe 2/3 of a way down a class, and the body is open enough because the hips are the gateway to the spine. So you've got to do a lot of hip opening first. You might do some gentle back bends leading up to it, but when you're talking about a bigger back bend, like a bridge pose leading into a wheel pose, now you're starting, to really feel some of that vulnerability and challenge associated with extending your spine. Extending your spine, and just means that you're going to open your spine from the front. So the front body is going to lift and it's going to open up, and the vertebrae on the front of your spine are going to create more space in between them on the front of the spine. On the back of the spine, those vertebrae are coming together. Now, here's the thing. How are you feeling, whether or not this is something that I'm fearful of? The theory is that back bends and will draw up fear and anxiety because, we're creating this big vulnerable expression by opening up our chest. Well, that's just one part of it, and that's kind of down the road of like the story of back bends. But once you've been practicing for a while and you're connected to your breath, there's really not stories and specifically attached to the poses like there used to be. So maybe somewhere in that, again, no dimension of time has to be fixed around this, but after a certain period, it's like your breath is guiding your body, right? Those stories are less attached into the actual poses while you're doing them. And so, Leslie, I know your practice and I know how long you've been practicing for. So at this point, I would say, the investigation is really around what you're feeling and how to understand the difference between, bone-on-bone compression. Because when you're going into a back bend, okay, what's happening? The space between the vertebrae is closing on the back, and in the front it's spreading. So what if your bones don't have that much space in the back and to compress, and then you're just basically connecting bone on bone? How do you know the difference in sensation? Well, you know the feeling of a stretch. If you just fold over your legs and you feel the back of your legs and your hamstrings, that's a stretch, right? But to understand the difference in what bone on bone feels like, which we're never going to change, you just take both of your hands, make fists, put your knuckles together, okay? You can pound them, you could just push them together, and you can notice that, hey, there's a stalemate there, right? No matter what I do, and those bones are not going to move. So in yoga, in postures, right, with breath obviously supporting, we've got to start to feel for something that we can't see with our eyes. So that's when you start to investigate this idea of bone to bone, because guess what? Everybody's vertebra in their spinal column are going to have different shapes and different nuances. And what we want to do is we want to revitalize the spine by compressing and releasing, right? But we don't want to create damage over time and just wearing and tearing and tearing and tearing. So this is just specifically about the spine and the back bend. But remember, I talked about opening up the hips, having the strength in the legs. So now you start to build, right, kind of this investigation around what are all these parts of my body doing, and to either make this accessible or not. Are there any injuries, for example? Did you have something happen to you? Did you have an accident? And do you have a herniated disc? All of these things start to become part of the investigation to determine, okay, if everything is status quo, and I understand the different sensations, and I have the breath supporting me, okay, then maybe there's something else holding you back and from your will and your breath to take you there. But I bet you if you just turn it over into your breath, knowing everything that you know, right? And then once you get into that moment where the opportunity presents itself, if you turn it over to the breath, now you're going to start to build in the direction of actually doing that pose. If there's all these other things that exist, an accident, things that you know, things that you're feeling, right? Then perhaps that is the wisest move. It's not about doing the bigger back bend, right? It's doing the back bend that works for your body. And so if you just take that whole scenario, we're talking about a pose or a back bend. If you take that whole scenario and break it down, and through the investigation process, which could take you a week, a month, a year, who knows how long you go down that road for, and you start to apply that approach with something else in your life. And notice this isn't about right or wrong. That's the beauty of philosophy. This is about you going down the road to discover and to see, what ultimately works best, and how it can feel best, and how you can, stay with your breath throughout. So I hope that helps. I'm not sure exactly where you are in kind of that investigation, but I would say even if this question and this answer kind of wakes up that investigation again, I'm sure you've gone down the road of investigating, the elements of the back bend, but now start going to another depth and detail around all the parts of your body and how they're feeling and how they're supporting, and then let's see where it goes. Good question. MZ, hi, hope you're well. Hi, Terry, thanks for joining. Leslie says, I hate wheel. Okay, so stalemate. So you've got an understanding related to the stalemate, then that's probably the bone. That's probably, if we had a picture of your spine, and this, every time somebody goes for an x-ray, unrelated to yoga, they say, oh, I had this happen, I got an x-ray done on my ankle or my knee or my shoulder. It could be for something totally different than yoga. I say, hey, can I see the x-ray? And then they'll normally nowadays have it on their phone, because now, I don't want somebody to go get an x-ray just so that I can see what their bones look like, but every time there is that information available, I get to look at their bones. And then it's going to show me so much more about that person's body. And so there's ways that we can see that on the outside without taking an x-ray. There's ways to take your arms out, pull your arms back, right? Meet the bone on bone, take your arms over your head, pull your arms back. So you're going to find, right, those different sticking points in range of motion. So I think just tagging it, and Leslie, when you're saying the stalemate, the bone on bone, it's like, don't force it. That pose may not, be what it is for everybody else based on the way that you're built and you're designed. So now we start celebrating this understanding and versus comparing ourselves into what somebody else may look like when they're doing it. The people that are on the cover of Yoga Journal, yeah, there's a lot of practice that goes into developing poses and whatnot. But a lot of it, it's like this stuff is in our genes. This is the stuff that we're made of. And then this is what we're allowed to do versus what we think that we need to do. So again, you could see in the conversation, if your mind starts to work in this way, man, there can be so many benefits into other situations and things that are going on in our lives.
So I hope that helps. Rosa, good afternoon. Andre, I just saw you, and thank you for coming by and picking up some shorts at the studio. I mentioned this the other day, you guys. We have a whole shop, so if your yoga clothes are getting stinky, you're just tired of them, and you want a new outfit, this is my sales pitch. You want a new outfit for your next Instagram post because you're sick of seeing the same clothes. Just teasing, but for real, Stacy, my wife, she curates a cool experience at the shop, at the studio, a lot of local artisans and whatnot. So we have a whole shop that I suppose you can do a little curbside pickup like Andre did, and I handed it off to him, and it does a couple things. We get to see each other, which is cool. I've been at the studio now twice a day doing the live classes from the studio. I'm actually set up, I just moved into the main studio, so I'm going to be bringing the classes live to you from the main studio going forward. So I'm here, so you could always message and reach out if you would like to explore any of that. Sorry, I'm looking down because that's where my iPad is, so I can see the questions. Rosa asked, I have slight hypertension in my arms, and when I do side plank, if I stretch my arm completely, I feel a lot of pressure in that joint and some pain. And if I do a little bend, I feel instability. So I'm guessing you're talking about straightening your arm versus a micro bend at your elbow, right? And the hypertension, maybe hyperextension. Yes, hyperextension, I think. I was thinking hypertension like blood pressure, but hyperextension. So this is a great element of the practice and a great question, talking about hyperextension. And basically what that means is that if you were to straighten your arm, right, most people's arms are going to stop around the stability of the joint, the muscles will engage, things are relatively lined up. A hypermobile or hyperextended person, right, that joint is going to start to go in the opposite direction, past neutral. So from one, right, and then past neutral into the other side, so the elbow is pulling in. So, we're talking about alignment. When you're talking about having some joints that may be, hypermobile, it's how do you create that alignment in your practice? So in side plank, not easy. You're turning your entire body onto one limb, and you're stacking it on, these aren't as big of a joint as your hip, right? It's relatively probably half of your hip, and then even smaller going down into your elbow, and even smaller going down onto your wrist. And so you're taking this funnel down to your hand, so just imagine the amount of force that is coming down into that arm. So something that you can do, and you can start to investigate, I'm going to use that word, investigation, is start trying to do your side plank on your forearm. So take half of the arm out of the equation. In the event that the elbow is hypermobile, in the event that the shoulder, right, maybe doesn't have the space, take half of the arm out of it. Come down onto your elbow, make a fist with your hand, okay, put way more surface area onto the mat, and it's going to help stabilize, and then see how you feel there, flexing your bicep, flexing your tricep, stabilizing around the shoulder and using the upper back. So in any plank, so much more strength and awareness comes from our legs and our upper back to get to our belly than we think. This isn't about putting all of the strength and relying on
these smaller muscles relative to the rest of the body in your forearm and your bicep and your tricep. So I would just back it down, start on your forearm, and then as you start to work it up, you know, that micro bend that you're talking about, the instability is because there's all that room in the joint. So your muscles have to get used to supporting that. So it's very slow, it's very gradual, and even when a class is moving, and I'm flowing with you now, right? And we're teaching and we're moving, and if I'm flowing, it's like you're slowing down. You're listening to your breath, listening to your body. If you go slower than me or what's being guided, whether you're on a live stream or you're in a class, right? You always know what's coming next. The instruction is still being laid out in front of you, so you're not going to get lost. And it's better for you to go slow and then work with some of those things that you're feeling in your body. You're the only one that's feeling that in your body. And then start to build the stability. So there's different ways. Instead of just straightening the arm. Like that's a general cue. Straighten the arm, put your hand into the mat. Micro bend, press the palm down, and then twist the elbow in. That's going to rotate your shoulder externally. That's going to draw more strength to your upper back. And so listen for some of those more detailed cues that come here and there. You're not going to get them every single time. But listen for those, and that may help you find that instability. But again, if you have the opportunity, right, take an arm in half, start there, build it up, see how it feels, use your legs. Good question, Rosa, thank you. Bradley, I will check my email to see maybe if we have those shorts, but I can also take a picture and show you the ones that we have for sure. Good, Rosa, I hope that was helpful. And this is just an awareness that you're building in your practice that's saying, hey, any day, any practice, a pose is okay to be broken down. We have a student right now, and she's been in regular touch, sharing her experiences, and she's got things in her body. She's feeling, you know, a lot in her body, as I imagine a lot of you are. We've been practicing every day for over 60 days. Some of you are doing 2 classes a day, and we have no way to really communicate and involve ourselves in the conversation around what you're feeling more specifically, like we do when you're coming into the studio. So, you know, every single pose on any given day, you can break it all the way down. You can take it down to your knees, build it back up, right? A yogi, a seasoned practitioner, somebody that's really curious about the yoga, is the one that listens to their body completely. No assumptions. As things progress, you'll hit a phase where it's going to break down again. You know, right now, I don't know what I did. We're living life, we're doing project at the house, but something is in my right foot. I feel something in my foot, I start to investigate that, I start to break. Feel my toes. I haven't, you know, thought about my toes as specifically as I've thought about my toes in the last 4 classes because something is appearing. So if something comes up in your body, it's like a knock on the door. It's like, hey, listen to me, and then you can start to work with it. And again, that approach is probably going to feed into other parts of your life. All right, anybody else on that has a question, comment? You probably don't want to hear more about my foot. I have my ideas around why I'm feeling my foot the way that I'm feeling it, which I'll share with you if there's no other questions to fill some of this space. Oh, good, Rosa. Okay, so during quarantine, I've been doing a lot of projects at the house, and the way that I approach projects, because there's an element of work with the project, but I try, you know, not to label it as work because it's something that I'm volunteering myself energetically to participate in. So, but every time, you know, you start getting involved in a project, there's going to be times where it's more work than not. There's going to be moments where things happen that you weren't expecting. So I mentioned this a couple weeks ago that I was turning a part that's on the side of our house. It's never been great at growing grass. I tried. There's just not enough water. It feels like the ground is concrete. So nothing's ever really taken there. So during the quarantine, I finally volunteered myself to turn it into a hardscape patio, brick patio specifically. So when you get started, I kind of looked at the plane of the ground, and I saw that it was on a little bit of a slope. But I don't do this every day, so I was like, okay, I probably got to take it down, 4 inches below the driveway so that it can line up once I fill everything back in and put the bricks on. Well, my eye that was telling me 4 inches actually turned out to be more like 12 inches. So I must have dug out for, a solid week. From I would get done with, the 10 o'clock class at 11 o'clock, say hi to people, exchange messages, and then basically until, 6 o'clock or so, I would be working, on this project. And during that time, there was plenty of space for, meditation and practice, because you're doing something that is repetitive. So the repetitive cycles, this is really mimicking the cycles of our breath when we're on our mat. It's also mimicking the great cycle of life, from the day we're born until the day that we die. So you're in this repetition, but then there are, certain phases of that project where you move on. And I think that's what feels good, and kind of similar when you're talking about yoga poses. You're going to repeat poses and they're going to feel pretty similar for a good amount of time, but then something's going to happen, the relationship is going to change, and then you're going to evolve, and then you're going to feel the support, and there's going to be this confidence that you now carry with you no matter what. It's just there. It's hard to describe, but you'll know it when you know it, and you'll certainly feel it. So I get through kind of that first, and it was grueling. I mean, it was hot, and took the opportunity to be in the sun, of course, and soak up the vitamin D, but digging out 12 inches of pretty much rock hard concrete, wouldn't even call it soil, it's just earth. So digging that out, there was, a mound, just had to be. So, that was one element physically, and, thank goodness for the yoga practice, because whatever I was doing with this shovel and this pickaxe, some days my shoulders and my neck and everything, my back, just hurt so bad, just so much sensation. But then I would do a detox class in the evening, and that would help, balance and counteract what I had done, and then I get back into the flow. So it never, was to the point where it was debilitating. So you get through that first phase of digging, and you think, okay, I've got, all the dirt removed, and now you start picking up on all the other detailed spots that are still slightly elevated. And so, one little, pickaxe to one spot now digs up another root, you go down this whole other road, and it just kept going and going and going, because, you've got to get it to this place where it can be, more of a level surface for your patio. So, still kind of getting past that point, there's a sense of somewhat relief when you're finally done digging, right? You feel like, oh, finally, I don't have to do that anymore. And now you start looking at the next step. And you're like, whoa, what have I gotten myself into? So this whole process, again, if you're, built with a little bit of courage and you trust yourself enough, we're probably going to go down this road, hundreds, if not thousands of times in our life. What have I gotten myself into? Such a good question. People ask that on their mat, especially in the hot room, like, what have I gotten myself into right now? Right? But connect to your breath and continue to repeat that cycle. Let it support you as you're going through, and moment by moment, you're going to find that energy and exactly what you need, and to keep progressing. So after the dirt, now I start to think about framing everything out. So I build a planter box, put it around the palm tree. That's going to become a little bit of a garden. And then you got to frame out your patio. So you're working more mathematics and geometry and figuring out straight lines. So, I'm kind of built that way in my mind. Analytics, I used to do software and data analysis before yoga. So I loved exercising that part of my mind that I haven't used in a while. So you take your best shot, and if things happen, and you can always, adjust as you need to, but that part turned out pretty good. And now it's time to go get the materials. So you got to plan and figure out how much material you need. So there's gravel that goes down, there's sand, and then there's the brick. So I go get the gravel, I go get the sand, and this, these are like 50, 75-pound bags. So again, it's a physical effort and repetition. You get 12 bags of gravel, 12 bags of sand, put them in the car, you unload them, you put them into the ground, you start flattening all that out. So we're layering, right? We're putting in layers. There's so much beauty in feeling the progress of the layers that you're putting into this project, which really is just turning into, this mirror of reflection, things that are going on in your mind. You're listening to music. There's just so much, and to see how this is turning into a meditation, and not just like a 5-minute meditation. This is turning into a week, and then 2 weeks, and then 3-week long meditation. So keep going, keep practicing, right? That's what's going on through my mind. When you hit those moments that are more challenging, okay, don't give up. What are you giving up on? You're just going to leave it, sitting there half done. So there's some part of you that is driving it. It's the same thing when you get into a practice, and those first 30 minutes can be somewhat challenging and rough, but then once that breath starts cooking in, then you're grooving and you're moving. So you just never know. You just don't count yourself out. So back to my foot. The reason why I think I'm feeling my foot is because this patio turned out to be 500 bricks. You would look at it and you would never think that it was going to take 500 bricks to put down in the patio. So the process of getting the bricks, go to the store, right? Fortunately, the people at the store wheeled it out on a pallet. I don't have a big truck to put the pallet on the car, take it home. So they wheel the pallet to the car, and I have to take and move 500 bricks from the pallet into my trunk, SUV. 500 bricks. Sitting in the middle of a parking lot, other people around, 500 bricks. Another opportunity in the secular process to meditate, to feel what you're feeling, to be in it, to repeat something 500 times. Probably took an hour, and I only got 380 bricks into the car because my car was compressed all the way down. So I was like, guys, I got to go drop these off, and then I'll come back and I'll get the rest. So I go to the house. Now I got to unload 380 bricks, 380 bricks, 380 bricks. Another meditation, okay? Something different. My son Ben was there. He helped me a little bit. He was handing me bricks. It was so cute. And then I got to go back to the store, get the rest of the 500, load them up, bring them back home, unload them, okay? So that's just one off the pallet into the car, from the car into the driveway. Now, when it's time to lay the bricks, now I got to move those 500 and set them, right, in level and make sure they're all placed properly. So the reason why I think I'm feeling something in my foot is because I moved 500 bricks 3 times. And every time you would bend down, and then when you were setting them, I would basically sit in a squat. So my heels were lifting up, right? And that is just going right into the arch of the foot and putting a stress there 500 times, setting, moving, not even necessarily thinking, what can my body withstand at this point? So the day or two after I got the patio finished, which was yesterday, feels like there is a golf ball in my foot. So clearly there is a stress associated with the repetition of the activity that I was doing. It doesn't mean that I have to just sit with that sensation and continue to investigate it. Sometimes I complain about it, no doubt about it. I'm like, this is so uncomfortable right now. But you know what happens? Take that discomfort. And here's the difference when Rosa was talking about discomfort versus pain. I wouldn't exacerbate the situation if I was in pain. It's uncomfortable to take a step sometimes. Something is probably inflamed, right? If I inflamed a tendon, something's probably inflamed. So I wouldn't continue if it was painful. But the amount of discomfort still allows me to move through my body. And wouldn't you know, right, if I'm just walking before or after a practice, I feel it in every step. When I'm on the mat doing yoga and the breath is guiding me in through all the mindful movements, I don't feel the foot at all. Now that's fascinating to me. Our body sensation is sending messages to our mind. Our mind component is sending messages back to our body. Our breath is interjecting something. Our breath is a component that is bringing the body and the mind together into where I don't feel the foot the way that I do when I'm walking. And I'm talking about one of these flow classes, you guys, where we're jumping back, we're jumping to the top, we're putting weight into our feet, lifting our heels, we're doing a squat, don't feel it at all. So, it's pretty fascinating when you really start and to relate this body, mind, breath connection and see where that takes you, right? Not only on your mat, but see where it takes you in that meditation or that yoga life and philosophy when you're, getting into your next project. I'm sure we're going to get into some more projects based on, where we are and things that are happening. I'm sure you've gotten into a lot of projects. So basically what I'm offering is to let that project come with you on your mat, and then when you're not on your mat, right, let your practice come back with you into that project. And that could be a cool way, if you're just scratching the surface, or if you've been practicing, kind of the yoga life philosophy for a while. Nayeli, hope you're well. Thanks for joining. I want to know how I can start to achieve the posture when you say flow chaturanga dandasana, inhale up dog, upward facing dog. So breaking that whole sequence down, I would suggest working it and so that you're sure that your breath is guiding your body, because that's where the body can kind of get confused, right? This is a transition and sequence that is used heavily in vinyasa-based classes, and we kind of take it for granted. The instruction, flows right out of my mouth so easily, but it is not the easiest thing to connect. So it's getting the breath to move the body, because if you work one of these movements on an exhale when the instruction is an inhale, it's not going to feel good at all. So if you just listen to it right now versus trying to do it, okay, I'll describe. You're at the top of the mat. You're in a forward fold. Okay, your hands are down on the ground, and then I say inhale, lift halfway. When you lift halfway, you want to keep your hands on the ground or connected to your shins. So you're not just lifting halfway and having like Frankenstein arms dangling. Okay, so you might bend your knees, connect to your core, feel your legs strong. Either hands stay on the ground or hands on your shins. Inhale, lift halfway. And then as you exhale, right, depending on how much space you have in your hamstrings, you can bend your knees, plant your hands, and step back into a high plank. High plank is when your body is parallel to the floor. And it's like the top part of a push-up. Okay? Get yourself back to high plank on that exhale, because when you exhale, your belly naturally comes back into your body. So there's engagement and support from your core and your thighs. And as you have your hands on the mat, that's going to engage through your upper back. Okay, so up to this point, we inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, hands to mat, step back into a high plank. Okay, now you're setting up your alignment. So inside of that transition, you're setting up the alignment so that your hands are about shoulder width apart. And then if you need more support, your feet are together. If your low back is pretty tight, you could separate your feet a little bit wider, like hip width distance apart. Okay, now first, as you're getting used to this sequence, I would say take the knees down onto the ground. It's what I was talking about with Rosa earlier, in that, take half of the limb away, come down onto her forearm for side plank. So if you put your knees down to the ground, you've taken half of the leg away. You're not putting nearly as much stress into the shoulders, into the elbows, into the wrist, as you're learning in this dynamic cueing and transition, breath and body. Okay, so you're at the high part of a push-up. Okay, take an inhale, and then on the exhale, knees down, bend the arms, keep the elbows by your sides. The reason we do that, bend the arms, keep the elbows by the sides, is because if you wing the arms out, what does that do? It turns the shoulder in. Okay, so elbows out turns your shoulder up and creates this compression around the base of the neck and the top of the shoulder. Elbow in draws the shoulder out, engages the upper back, and puts far less weight into your shoulder. You want this strength coming from your back, your belly, and your legs. So start on your knees, right? As you exhale, bend the arms, elbows in, and you're coming halfway down. So halfway down, chaturanga is arms bend to a 90-degree angle. If you look at my forearm to my bicep, 90 degrees, right? That's more like 120 degrees. That's more like 30 degrees or 45 degrees. So 90-degree arm bend, elbows end up relatively by your rib cage. Firming your hands into the ground. You've got your knees on the ground, your upper back is wide, so you're using all of that strength. Make sense? Okay, so that's on the exhale. So again, breath moving the body. Inhale, lift halfway. Exhale, plant the hands, step back into a high plank. Take a breath in your plank. Lower your knees. Exhale, bend your arms, elbows by your ribs. Okay, now if you're on your knees, you're not even going to mess with upward facing dog. You're going to bring your chest all the way down onto the mat. And then keep your elbows into your sides, and you're going to work the modified up dog, which is a pose called cobra. Modified even more, it's called baby cobra. So there you would just keep your hips down, and then inhale, roll your heart off the mat. And then exhale, bring your chest back down. Inhale, you press back up to all fours, hands and knees. Exhale, press back into your downward facing dog. Okay, so step by step, there's like 8 to 12 steps in that process. Breath moving body is the key, right? Your body will get used to that coordination, and then you can work that alignment, you can wake up the muscles, and then you'll start to feel that flow happening. As you build the awareness of the breath and supporting you through all of these poses making up this sequence, that's when you can start to lift the knees. But we don't want to lift the knees until we have the strength in the legs and the coordination of the breath moving the body. So then if you did it with knees lifted, it would go like this. You're at the top of the mat. Inhale, lift halfway. Exhale, forward fold. Plant your hands, step back into your high plank. Take an inhale in your plank. Exhale, bend your arms, elbows to your ribs, and your legs are long. You're kicking back through your heels, grounding down through the balls of your feet. And then with your inhale, press the hands into the mat. Keep turning your elbows in. Roll over the toes so you're on the tops of your feet. Now your knees are hovering off the ground. See how much is going into this? And something we just merely, right, like it's poetry in motion, talk about in a class. So your knees are hovering in up dog. Arms straight, palms ground, turning your elbows in, shoulders away from your ears. Okay? And then chin to chest, belly draws in, pike your hips back up, and you're in a downward facing dog. Okay? So what may help, now that you have kind of this premise, what breath is moving your body into each of these different steps, okay? Watch it back on one of the videos. Okay? Watch me do it when I take an inhale, and then exhale, bend the arms, and then inhale, press. So when we're in yoga classes, there's so much that you're getting through the cue, right? And relating your breath into your movement, but there's also so much that you're getting from the people that are practicing around you, right? Most of the time, people don't even realize consciously how much they're getting from being able to see other people doing it. It's tremendous. And it's like when we first start, if somebody's brand new or relatively newer to the practice, I don't tell them to go into the back or the third row because they don't belong in the front. Like, belong in the front row, that's great. What I do is I say, just go behind a few people, because what you see in front of you is going to help you pick up so much awareness in your body. And then you start blending that with the breath awareness that you're building. That's what I'm talking about, the breath that is moving you through the positions. And now you start to feel, this is where you start to feel the flow. This is where, because of course, if you're not in that flow with breath moving body, it feels like you're getting bounced off the wall like a pinball machine. Your heart rate is increasing and your mind is going nuts, and it's like, what is happening right now? So once you start to coordinate that breath awareness and body awareness, the whole practice of flow starts to open up. And that doesn't mean flow that moves fast or flow that moves slow. That's just straight up flow that, again, what you're learning on your mat is going to go with you and you can experience that flow, you know, in many different ways in your life. So I hope that that helps, some of that instruction, and then look back on video and, you know, watch that sequence play out, and then start on your knees, build it up, and see how it feels. Keep me posted. Let me know how it feels. What else, you guys? What other questions might you have? Anything on the emotional front? Things that you've experienced, emotions you weren't expecting to see, things that are going on, the mental awareness of your practice, or the spiritual awareness of your practice. I'm happy to continue to share about my patio, but you know, it's something interesting when you set out and your patio is nearing completion. And I said it actually was a little sad that I was finishing it. Like, I was proud and I feel that it came out nice, but there's also this, you know, what happens when you complete something. You know, now it's more geared into, you know, what can be added around it and kind of fill out its beauty and its purpose and all that kind of stuff. So something pretty cool about, you know, creating, which is, you know, really a gear that we're all clicking into when we're practicing yoga. We're creating something together, whether it's in the live classes. I think you feel it tangibly, and we come out and everybody's sitting on the porch. It's pretty cool, but you know, even on the virtual platform, so many people this week have expressed that they were doing the recorded classes and then they had the opportunity to do the live class when it was happening, and they're like, whoa, like there is something that you can actually feel, you know, through that platform. Hey Ellie, okay, I'm gonna do that like you say, because when I watch you, I see that you're in a handstand. Yeah, so, you know, something that I certainly thought about on these live classes is, you know, doing the practice, but you know, there's always options. There's ways that I'm kind of opening up the guidance, and I'll say, do this, if not do that. I'll say, do this, opportunity is to do that. And I thought about, you know, practicing, should I strip my personal practice down, being that I'm holding the space and teaching and sharing the practice with you all, or should I see what happens if I just, you know, take all of that, take those parameters off of myself and see where the practice goes. And, you know, it's been pretty interesting because my practice has opened up and developed in ways physically, mentally, and emotionally and spiritually that I never could have anticipated at all. And this isn't because, you know, I'm trying to do something and wanting you guys to see. This is just focus, concentration, a lot of breath, and things in places that I know can expand that I haven't been able to do before. So I don't really know the answer as to why, okay, those things are possible, but before this I wasn't doing handstand. Before quarantine, I could do a handstand, and I was practicing on doing handstands, but during quarantine, something has clicked. The focus, concentration, breath awareness is there, and it's going up easier and easier, and that's just the beginning. You know, once it starts going up with some sense of balance and ease, there's always things that can be tweaked, you know, and continue to grow in different ways to engage more breath and more lightness in the body. And then of course paying attention to make sure you're not, you know, going down this path of wear and tear. Like if you do something repetitively, like I was talking about, moving 500 bricks 3 times, you could create some wear and tear in your body. And so it's not just a matter of like figuring it out and then doing it mindlessly. It's, you know, working down that path, and then as mindfully as you can, pay attention, draw your focus and your breath awareness, and just see, you know, where your practice takes you in those moments. And I find that that's what feels most fulfilling, is to just listen to that and see where it goes. And, you know, some days I've, you know, fallen out of poses and lose my balance, and, you know, we're all human. So it's not about, trying to perfect any of these things. Ultimately, it's once we realize the flow, that flow is going to go and it's going to stay and sustain itself with us, and so that it can continue to, get us back onto our mat or support us in our lives. I'm sure many of us are dealing with different challenges and stressors that we never anticipated dealing with. We got about time for one more question. If anybody wants to throw one out there, I'd love to continue to interact with, a part of your practice versus, sharing. I love sharing about my practice, but I'd love to get one more question from anybody that's listening. Okay, well, I guess we could talk a little bit about, if you have a question, go ahead and chime in. I'll see it. But we just talk a little bit about, what the environment might look like, if you're in Los Angeles and you're able to come back and practice. Hey, Kendra, as Jeff, love you too, pal. What the studio might look like when we're able to open up again. Definitely there's going to be social distancing. So we'll have reduced capacity of classes. We'll start out and we'll rebuild. We're going to continue our practice, but from a studio perspective, it's going to be, kind of rebuilding the essence from where we left off. And this whole situation that has happened in our world, it has broken things down. So we've talked about it in our body. We've talked about it in the analysis of a yoga pose. Hey, we're not afraid of breaking things down, right? Because it's exciting and it's enriching, and it's something special to build it back up. So we really look forward to that opportunity with everybody that comes back. So social distancing in the lobby, social distancing in the room, right? This will take some awareness and patience on every person that is participating, but our utmost responsibility is to make sure everybody is healthy and safe, from our teachers to our staff and to all of you as students. And then, when we leave the space, we want to make sure everybody's safe. When you go home to your families and to your little kids and things like that. So contact-free environment. You'll basically be supported to come into the studio, and you won't touch anything. You'll have to bring your own yoga mat and your own yoga towel for the time being. These are all based on, as we see this thing move further and further. But for the time being, we just don't want to be renting mats and towels, right? You can be responsible and know that, what you're using is only being used by you. So bring your own mat, bring your own towel. We won't be using any blocks, any props. Teacher will be more stationary up in the front of the classroom. We have a system here where we can, have the teacher mics so they're not having to project their voice. So we can stay in more of our talking voice, hold our space, and guide you as clearly as possible. But to get back to that energy and that feeling of, everybody breathing and moving together, one thing that we will do is have you wearing your face coverings when you're in the common space. So moving, and utilizing the restrooms and whatnot, wearing your face covering. And then once you get into the studio, once you get onto your mat, you could just have that face covering beside you. So this is the plan. If it changes, we'll keep you posted. But we want to make sure that you're getting enough oxygen and air intake as you're moving, because we are a hot yoga studio. But we also want to have that safety measure close by. We're human, just in case you have to cough or you have to sneeze. Like, these are normal things that we will do. So you could have that face covering, handkerchief, whatever it might be, next to you on your mat, and so you have it. And this is respect. We're learning about the respect and the awareness, and for all beings and for everybody, that we're sharing the space with. Once we're done with the class, it'll be more like dismissing the class. So if you wanted to stay, for example, and just enjoy your Shavasana, then just stay. But if you're one that just, I'm done, I gotta go, right? We'll do that in a more orderly fashion, like back row, third row, second row, first row, right? So that it's not just you going. So a little more patience, be a part of the process, be a part of the whole unit, and then we can kind of, file everybody out that way. Again, contact free. So doors are open for you. You won't have to touch anything. Initially, the showers will not be available, so you will be able to change your clothes, of course, but we'll kind of limit that until we learn more about, again, the public health situation. Once you go, we will have plenty of time to clean everything in the studio and disinfect, right? Our floor is clean, our mirrors are clean, anything that anybody possibly could have touched, even though you won't be touching anything, everything will be clean in between every single class. And so, that's how we'll come back from this, and we'll start building and growing and practicing and breathing and doing this together once again. We look so forward into being able to do that with all of you guys. Let's see, Rosa, thank you very much for your talk. The message definitely leaves a lot of learning and something to work on, becoming aware during difficult situations, breathing through them, working through them, and being able to transform them. Yes, that is such a beautiful way to summarize this Yoga Life chat, the transformation. Change, it's inevitable. It's happening right now. It's moving through you, it's moving through me. It is something that, we need not fear. We don't also have to be, super excited about it. A lot of this kind of roller coaster ride and the things that we're experiencing in life or on our yoga mat is all there for the teaching. Level set and kind of find a baseline called peace and contentment. I mentioned it, and I mentioned it a lot of times in classes. It's not the high of high, even though you're going to have those highs. But those highs are going to be matched with some lows. And you go up and you're going to go down and then back around. So if we can ultimately let our practice and our lives find a nice state of equilibrium and balance, maybe less fear, maybe more richness and clarity into our mind, peace connected to our hearts, oneness, love, whatever you want to call it, the appreciation, we are going to have a tremendous opportunity and to put all of this into practice as we start moving around, this beautiful world again and interacting with each other, to face all of these things. But if we could do it with the awareness, if we're not kind of holding ourselves back and, if we can be open to listening into one another, right? Not thinking that we have to have the answer, but more adaptable. Mindfulness in many ways is being with what is right now. And part of that is the ability to adapt, and not necessarily be persuaded and won over, but, adaptable, make concessions so that we're not only looking out for ourselves, but we in a more communal way. So something that we've always strived to derive through, a studio, and, I think yoga studios many of them would agree that, these are component pieces that we hope to introduce into our own lives and remind ourselves and obviously share them with others for their lives. But now we just got to stretch it a little bit wider than the yoga studio. We got to stretch it into our school systems with our kids. We got to stretch it out into, restaurants when we go out to eat. We got to stretch it out into how we travel and, just really start to see, where we can contribute a little bit more into that greater sense of humanity. So I want to thank you all for your incredible participation. Your questions really drive the joy and the ability for me to share the things that I do, and we'll keep these going. And again, they'll be out there, so if you want to share them with anybody, it'll be live on the channel in about an hour. Okay. Thank you. I hope you all have a beautiful rest of your Friday and a safe and happy holiday weekend. Monday is Memorial Day, so please be safe, be kind, and let's continue to expand our awareness. We'll start locally and we'll grow globally. And we'll start with ourselves and we'll continue to spread that, and from here going forward. And thank you all so much. Namaste.